Thank you so much today for joining me, Ira. My name is Jillian Hamilton. I'm from Managed Damage Australia, and it's with my greatest pleasure that I introduce Ira Goldstein. Ira has, many years ago, started the Black Car Fund. So in Australia, recently, New South Wales Safe Work did a partnership with a company called Upcover, who have been as a recommendation as a result of a recent inquiry into Australian workplace deaths that have occurred in gig workers, particularly 5 workers who have lost their lives as a result of working in platform economy workplaces. So when I saw this particular news, to me, immediately Ira came to my mind because we met each other so long ago in 2018 in Williamsburg in the US of A. We were both at the International IABC Compensation Conference in Williamsburg in the US. And I was kind enough to meet yourself and Uber, who had worked together, and you had worked out a particular insurance fund. So it was not dissimilar to what's happening in Australia right now. And I thought, wow, let's go back to the source. Let's speak to Ira and ask what he had done, why he had done it, and what the benefits were that we had seen. So interestingly, I did some stats this morning, Ira, and you wouldn't believe it. In New York, as you know, you have 8.4 million people, okay? So in the state of New South Wales, where this particular new insurance is coming to play, we have 8.2 million people. So it's like almost the exact same size. The other interesting factor is, and I couldn't believe this, is that in New York today, they say we have about 80,000 Uber drivers. That's only just Uber drivers. So we're going to have to get the stats on all the drivers in New York. Obviously, cabs are the way to do things. But in Australia, in the whole of Australia, we only have 62,000 Uber drivers. So you have a good story to talk to us about. And I wanted to talk about, how you started your fund, what are the benefits. Let's talk about the insurance. And I knew you were the place to go to. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it's good to see you again. It was only 2018. For these days of the pandemic, it seems like it was much longer ago in a way. So,
absolutely.
But happy to chat with you today.
Thank you so much. And it does feel like a million miles ago, doesn't it? There's been so much has happened in the last few months, let alone the year. And, 2018 in business world, it feels like a billion years ago. I know your fund has grown and you've done some amazing things. So can you tell me about your journey? How did it start and why did you start the Black Car Fund, please?
Okay, so the Black Car Fund was founded in 1999, so well before there was the gig economy. And it was meant that there was discussions with New York State and the black car industry about they wanted drivers to have workers' compensation insurance, and the industry wanted to provide a stable platform to do so. So they came up with this rather unique business model by forming the Black Car Fund. And what that is there is a state law that says that if you are a black car base operator in New York State, that you must be a member of the Black Car Fund. Now, the requirements to be a member of the fund are that a base operator that dispatches its vehicles has to be do 90% or more of its business on a non-cash basis, and the base must own less than half its vehicles. So that basically captures all your independent contractors. It also captures if there's an instance where there's a base that may have a hybrid model where they may own some of the vehicles. They can all be insured for workers' compensation purposes by the Black Car Fund. The law states that for workers' comp purposes only, that they are deemed to be employees of the Black Car Fund. The revenue for this does not come from the drivers, and it doesn't come from the bases. It's done through a surcharge that is tacked onto every trip. that is collected by the bases and is remitted to the Black Car Fund on a monthly basis. Currently, the surcharge is 3%, and I will explain to you how it was, how it came to be 3%. It started off at 2% during the Great Recession. It had to be increased to 0.5%, and then we recently increased it in November of last year, an extra 0.5%, because there was an exciting legislation that we worked with the Independent Drivers Guild, which is an offshoot of the International Aerospace and Machine Workers, that we worked in the state capitol to get new legislation. What that new legislation allows us to do is to use up to 0.5% of a surcharge, or surcharge that we collect, to provide the drivers with additional health-related benefits. And so now we've gone beyond just giving the drivers workers' compensation, but they also have an optical plan, a dental plan. They have access to telemedicine, a 24/7 telemedicine network, which was obviously very key during and is now during the pandemic times. They also get discounted prescription plan. They also get a discounted access to an urgent care network, among other things. So those are the main additional benefits that the drivers now receive as well. And we currently have, last time I checked, probably about a month ago, we had 35,000 drivers that are enrolled for these additional benefits. When the weather gets better, or when the pandemic, I should say, clears, we'll probably have a vision van, we call it, that will go out into the street, and we'll go to the bases and visit where the drivers congregate at airports, holding cells, things like that, where they'll be able to get a vision appointment on the spot, and have the whole appointment done on the spot. And they're entitled to do that once a year.
Fantastic. Wow, what a journey. So, Ira, tell me, 1999, this is like a million years ago in our current world. So tell me, how did it start? Like, what sparked the idea?
Well, it was the idea that it was a joint thing between the state and the black car industry. The state showed an interest in wanting the drivers that they knew were predominantly independent contractors to have workers' compensation insurance. They came to the industry. The industry was willing to do that, and they came up with this rather unique business model. I wasn't there at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Though. So I didn't get there till 2000.
So
2009, excuse me.
Yeah, okay. So tell me how, do you know who started, can you tell me a bit more about the mechanics of, how it kind of was birthed? Because you talk about this alliance. Australian people don't really know, about your alliance and that sort of group. Could you tell me a bit about that group?
Sure. It was, I guess you could call them the founders of the black car industry, which really came into formation in New York in the mid 1980s, and with the state legislators and the governor's office. And it took a couple of years to come up with this rather unique business model till they got something that would work, that obviously would be fiscally stable. I guess you could say one of the reasons that there's the requirements that there are to be a dispatch base that's doing 90% or more of its business on a non-cash basis. Remember, back then you weren't able to just swipe your credit card anywhere, particularly not in a car with wireless, right?
Yeah.
Was because you need the financial accountability. For instance, there's also within New York, in the for-hire industry, there's the livery industry, and they do a lot of cash business. So there wouldn't be that same financial accountability. So it was necessary, as you know, being in the insurance business, you needed to have a good audit, a good trail to make sure that the monies were being paid in properly to be able to supply the right benefits.
Yeah, okay. So interestingly, I think the last time I checked that most of the cab car colours in New York are yellow, not black. Is this still true? I mean, I haven't been to the New York for a little while.
The yellows are still iconic of the city. However, the yellows don't have any part of. They are not members of the Black Car Fund. That there was separate legislation before that most, about half, are independently owned and operated, so they're not required to have workers' comp. And if they do have what they call a second shift, where they lease their cab out when an owner's not working, or if it's a fleet-owned situation, they're required to have a workers' comp policy separate from the Black Car Fund.
Okay. So in the Black Car Fund, what kind of brands or companies do you who are normally, who your workers are working for? Who are we talking about that you're working with,
Sure. Well, it started traditionally with what gets referred to as traditional or legacy black car companies. Those are companies that do a very large share of their work is with corporate accounts. A lot of airport work, transportation to and from office buildings, to different events and things of that nature. Then when Uber and Lyft and some of the other TNCs, transportation network companies, came about, since they met that criteria that I mentioned before, they were mandated to be members of the Black Car Fund as well. I don't think they were thrilled about it. I probably said that when you saw me the first time with the gentleman from Uber that was on the panel. But I think they're very happy with the way the trend and things are going in the States and really around the world. Really, from what I see, I think they're very happy that they're members of the Black Car Fund now.
Yeah, look, it's interesting actually. When we did meet with Uber then, back in 2018, I think they definitely acknowledged that this was a solution that they were actually looking for, and it obviously has been and is all around the world a little bit of a challenge for them because they're running a platform model. They do try to insist that they are not the employer, and of course all around the world there's court cases and employee, not employee, subcontractor, not subcontractor. But regardless of in your circumstance, it doesn't actually matter how. It just matters that they are one of the Black Car Funds. And for Uber, it's actually a no-issue problem because actually they don't even pay. The user pays. Is this correct? Because it's just a little surcharge on the end of every tab.
That's correct. And I think it's even fair to say that Uber has embraced this model with some modifications at this point because the CEO wrote some months back a letter to the New York Times, and he refers to it as the third way, meaning something between the employer-employee relationship and an independent contractor.
Yeah, and I think, look, in our current times, people have stated, and there's been some really interesting reports, especially in the US, that they're saying that people who are working in platform economies like Uber and the such, they've felt the most secure out of all the workers in the whole of the US during this period, during this unraveling time of COVID. People have had the most surety of work compared to other people if they've been doing this kind of work. They're already remote. They already know how to work remote. They already have customers. They already are providing a service on their own and they don't need to start a new business. They are already starting a new business. So the flexibility, the independentness, and the ability to continue working and actually having some of that security by the fact that they know they have a way to make an income has really actually been a savior for a lot of people. And some people have even, additional people over the world have turned to platform economies and have turned to places like Uber for employment during the downturn, knowing full well people still need to transition around the world and move in their cars. And Cabs is a great place. You have a car, you pick it up, you put on the app and you have a work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I think is important that there be I used to call them a dependent contractor. You can play with whatever phrases you want, but if you want to call it the third way. There has to be something as a middle ground between the two, because a lot of these platform businesses, not just in the for-hire business, vehicle business, they started off, they were meant to be part-time gigs. Now, it became full-time for a lot of people. So these folks that are working there, they work hard. It's not an easy way to make a living, in the States. So they need some kind of safety net. So that's what the Black Car Fund model proves can be done. Because right now, the only thing that restricts what we can offer, so to speak, is what the legislation, because it is a state mandated fund and we are not for profit, is we're only limited by our legislation. In other words, that extra 0.5%, it had to be health related, but there's nothing that says that it couldn't be, with that restriction lifted, that you could collect and provide disability benefits. There's nothing to say that the base itself may be able to put a small percentage in towards some type of surcharge as well, and it could be managed through the Black Car Fund. I testified 2 or 3 weeks ago in New York State. There was a Senate hearing, a joint committee of the Labor and Transportation Committees, and at the conclusion of my testimony, I asked, because this legislation that I referenced to you, that extra 0.5%, does have a sunset provision. So it expires in December of 2022. So we need to make sure that we're keeping good stats and do a great job of outreach to the drivers to ensure that when the time comes to review it, and to either have it renewed or to have that sunset provision removed altogether. And potentially, as I said, even removing that word health, that would give us more flexibility in terms of what we can do for the drivers. It's a stable model. One of the questions I got that I received at the Senate hearing was in the times of how the pandemic has hit here, it's been very bad. The black car industry was down. The traditional or legacy black car industry was down 80 to 90%. Uber's probably down 50%. So they wanted to know, how was the Black Car Fund faring through that? And even though our revenue is down that same amount because it's surcharge based, we're financially, we're healthy. We had a relatively good year. And that's because a lot of our costs are not fixed costs, but flexible or variable costs. So while obviously the whole pandemic's a tragedy, we're coming through it very well.
Fantastic. And look, it's interesting actually because the service you provide is so very essential. Can we talk a little bit about the details of the service you provide? And let's talk about some of the inclusions and specific offerings, because remember, we don't know exactly about it. So if you could tell me, step by step, what do workers get when they sign up to the Black Car Fund?
Sure. So what workers are covered for, and technically it's not the drivers that are the members, it's the bases that are the members. Okay. So one of the beauties of the Black Car Fund model is that the drivers get these portable benefits. You could have a driver that works in the matter of a day, could work for 2, 3, 4 different companies. He could work for a traditional black car base, then do some work for Uber, do some work for Lyft, back and forth. And long as he's legally dispatched and he's not doing some illegal activity, he's going to be covered no matter which company he works for. So that's part of the beauty is the portable benefits. In terms of workers' compensation, they basically, under state law, they get the full benefits that any other worker is entitled to, with certain caps and restrictions. But they get basically 2/3 of their income is covered. What we've also done over the years is we have some educational classes that we actually pay the drivers to take. So we have an enhanced defensive driving class here. I don't know if you have something similar in Australia, where it's not just specific to this industry, but to any driver. A lot of insurance companies, if you take this defensive driving class, they'll give you a discount on your auto rates, your auto liability rates.
Yeah.
They're also required to take it every 3 years for their license with the New York City Taxi Limousine Commission. We actually pay the drivers $300 to take that class. We'd rather have them in a classroom than doing it online. We feel that, you don't pay as much attention online, and we just find that it's much more, conducive to learning in an in-person atmosphere, as well as it helps us mitigate risk, right? If everyone's being a safer driver. We also have a wellness program that drivers are entitled to take, where we pay them $150 to take it. There's 4 components to this wellness program. One is they learn different stretching, strengthening exercises, and eating tips, how to eat healthy, in particular for drivers and the type of ailments that they get from sitting for long periods of time. The second component is they learn hands-only CPR. We have dummies in the class, and they work hands-on with the dummies, so they learn that if, God forbid, there's a situation where they have to take action to save a passenger. We also teach them how to respond to Amber Alerts. An Amber Alert in the U.S. is when a child has been abducted and it's believed that they're in imminent danger. The local police force will ask the state coordinator to put out an Amber Alert, where they put out pictures of the child, a description of the car. And in the United States, you'll see it at tunnels and bridge crossings and other things like that. So they're taught how to respond to an Amber Alert. And then finally, because we think you can never have enough safety instruction, they learn there's a segment called Share the Road that a good organization in New York called Bike New York comes in, and they learn more safety tips about sharing the road with cyclists and pedestrians. So we have those offerings. We also added where if a driver were to die while he's on a job, we added an additional $50,000 death benefit for his beneficiaries. So that's something that obviously a lot of the drivers, they're kind of, paycheck to paycheck type folks. They're hustling, they're working hard, hustling in a good sense. So we felt that was important, that if they were working while they pass, then we give their family an additional $50,000 on top of any death benefits that they're entitled to under the New York State workers' compensation laws.
Wow.
And then the other benefits I had mentioned to you with these new additional benefits were the other things, that I mentioned previously. So it's a nice, robust package for the drivers right now for 3%.
Yeah, what an amazing security for workers. I put my hand on my heart and say thank you to you, because, obviously the business you're conducting is making so much great change. And not only to the drivers, but you're making change to the general public. If your drivers are learning how to give CPR, life-saving CPR, if your drivers are learning how to respond to Amber Alerts, they're the people on the road who can help find, potentially help and assist the police in the case of a lost child.
That's what the New York State Police felt. They felt that they're really good eyes and ears, in particular in the black car industry, even more so than taxis that are always cruising. A lot of times black cars, they're stationary while they're waiting for a job or they're waiting for a customer to come out. So they might see more than typical person on the street.
Amazing. And then also to be able to put your hand in your pocket and say, look, we think that also the death benefits are not enough, and we want to add to that. I just think, you are doing something so phenomenal, and I think, to me, it's a model that can be absolutely transported and should be, because that other piece, that if a worker works for a number of different driving agencies, if their particular agency, so for example, in Australia, Uber has picked up some insurance responsibilities, and there's some, insurance benefits, but there's other agencies who may not be as well established and or as responsible, and so they're not providing those benefits So in your particular circumstance, you're covering that little gap. Because, there's that connection of if they are working with different platforms that are operating on that non-cash basis, there's an actual trail to follow through on, then they still have a cover. And what a great sense of security and for people to feel that their family will be looked after and that they themselves can do this work and know that if something terrible was to happen, that their family would still be okay.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, one of the more important benefits that I didn't mention to you was that we have a mental wellness program that is administered for us by the Independent Drivers Guild, the organization that I mentioned to you that represents the Uber and Lyft drivers. And probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I don't know if it made news down under, but there was a rash of suicides amongst drivers in New York because of the fiscal strains that they were under. They were taxi drivers, they were black car drivers, limo drivers, livery drivers, black car, all segments of the industry. There were I think it was about 8 or 9 suicides in about 9 months. And at that time, we felt it was very important to get counseling for the drivers. And so we had a mental wellness program set up where they can get a hold of someone, speak to someone one-on-one. There's therapists that are retained that work with IDG on that, by IDG. And also there's group sessions, there's individual, they'll get them the help that they need. They also, IDG went out and went above and beyond and also added in different things like helping them with, because it's really running a small business when you're an independent contractor. So they get they help them out with different advice financially. And having that program in place when the pandemic hit was really crucial. And that was something that during that, I wasn't the only one testifying at that Senate hearing, was a question that senators brought up at times, was what are you doing about the mental wellness with everything going on? So, that's something that we're really proud of as well.
Absolutely. So advanced and such a great, response to such a challenging time. And, when there's a crisis, the opportunity can be forged. And this is it, we don't expect to see the Black Car Fund ceasing any of these benefits. As you said, we're going to keep going and adding benefits where you can and maintaining that clause, which was in before the pandemic, to be able to keep people sustained and doing the best work they can.
And you realize, being in the business, that before the pandemic, most people didn't even know what telemedicine was, or thought it was kind of a unusual concept to speak to your doctor. Now if I have the option, unless they need to do some kind of blood test or something, I'd rather just talk to the doctor on a video cast like we're talking now. So the usefulness and the popularity of that really took off during the pandemic. I'm just lucky I have a good board of directors that wants to do the right thing and gives me the latitude to make these things happen.
Yeah, fantastic. And interestingly, actually, even in Australia, before, telemedicine was almost illegal. We weren't allowed to do telemedicine in Australia before the pandemic. Only very few places were able to do it. It wasn't deemed a legal way of engaging, and they weren't even allowed to bill you for a telemed. And now, I have to give you the example of, I myself, if I need to refill a script and I know I've got a busy work day, I am absolutely for going to a telemedicine, because in 10 minutes time, I haven't left my desk and I have achieved my health requirements. So we're not putting off what we need to do to wait until we have time in our schedule, which is often what happens for busy people. And for us, at the moment, for example, in Brisbane, we have a little limited lockdown for COVID right now. And in this particular circumstance, everybody would prefer to do a online or a telemed consult, because it reduces our chances of contagion. And it means that we can get what we need without moving in the community and potentially, having any contacts of that sort of nature. So it really has been, a real benefit from this great crisis around the world is to really birth the telemed, which I know and I have seen, and the stats even for young people have completely increased their ability to get access. It's increased people's ability to actually have mental health treatment. Because people didn't want to go to meetings publicly and have somebody see them. People are calling in all over the world for AA. People are calling in for all over the world for mental health issues. And one of my dear friends, she said to me, I now do my AA meeting sometimes in Ireland, and she's in Brisbane. So it's a very good, thank God there can be some wonderful things to come of this. And I'm very pleased to see the black car. Now, tell me.
And now also, just if I may add, I'm sorry, Jillian, but also think about it again, that these are independent contractors and their time is money. So for them to be able to, where maybe if they got into an accident and maybe, sometimes when you first get in an automobile accident, you kind of feel okay and it doesn't hit you till later. This way they can get on with a doctor and they could tell them whether they need to get in to see someone in person and get some tests done right away or not. And also it can be used as a follow-up after the accident when they're undergoing therapy. So for your insurance audience that's out there, it can also help mitigate the costs and reduce costs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we've seen, I'll give the example of remote Australia. We have some workers who can't get to appointments without driving 4 hours, 4 entire hours drive to go to a physical doctor. So the introduction of telemed has absolutely altered, the accessibility. And then you add, like what you said, some people, they find it difficult to make it to their appointments because of their workers' compensation claims. Now the sometimes barriers of leaving the home and getting in a piece of a car, whether it be a transport of any way to get to their particular appointment, can be a barrier for a workers' comp person. And so in that particular state, we're throwing away those barriers so that we can ensure continuity of care, which is speed of recovery, which is back to work, which is a happy worker. And that's a great worker for everybody.
Absolutely. Great point.
Now, tell me about your business. How does the strategy happen? You said you have a great set of board members. Tell me, how do you decide what to do next? How does it get planned at your place?
Well, that's, I think that, as I stated before, I'm lucky that I have a good board. I think they've really accepted, obviously, all these new ideas that have come about that we've worked on. It's more or less when I bring a suggestion to the board, or board members themselves are very active and they have ideas. Give you a touch of potential breaking news. We're looking into a new driver educational offering. What we find is, because it's a very diverse work force that we're dealing with, and they're not coming into a centralized office or facility, because we have over 400 bases that are members. A lot of times the drivers they're not aware of the benefits that they have, or there may be misconceptions about it. So it's more difficult to communicate with the drivers. So one of the board members came up with the idea that we're currently exploring, is to add a new class that would be a few hour course offering, where the drivers could come in and we will teach them about their rights and benefits with the Black Car Fund. And as well as we're looking at also potentially doing it as a video, so that we can reach a broader stroke of drivers on that. So that's something that we will also pay the drivers to learn again, because we know their time is money. So that's something that we're looking into right now.
I think that's fantastic.
So in a microcosm, I guess, as an example, that's an idea of how these things come about. Yeah,
fantastic. Actually, I wanted to just throw back as well this one thing that I remember in 2018, and it was like my biggest aha of your presentation, which might sound a bit funny, but when you said, and we do eye tests, and I thought, of course, people who drive cars absolutely need to have great eyesight. And, I was thinking, oh my God, I wonder whether my taxi driver knows to see the road when he drives me to the airport out of here. So tell me about the eyesight, how that, came into your coverage.
Right. We saw that as something that we thought was not only important for the drivers, but again, for your insurance audience, that could potentially mitigate our risk and damages. The drivers work long hours, 12-hour shifts, sometimes a little more, though legally in New York, they're not supposed to do more than 12 hours in a row. And if they're working at night, I mean, if you're a passenger, you want to make sure your driver's eyesight is good. So we added that as a benefit. They are entitled to the exam and a set of glasses once a year. If they use contacts, they're entitled to, I think, 6 months of contacts. They can't get the, they can't get the Gucci or Armani, frames, but they can get a nice frame, that they have a huge selection. And like I said, before the pandemic hit, we had a vision van that would go out to the airports, the holding areas where they wait for jobs. We know areas where they congregate at different restaurants or a base. All they had to do was ask and say, hey, can you get the vision van here next week at 2:00? And we'll give you the whole afternoon. And they would come in, and there was a licensed optometrist that was able to perform, I think it was 4 or 5 different vision tests on the spot. Okay, as well as also be able to make an appointment if they weren't able to get in on the spot. We had I think it was over 300 or 400 different optical stores they could go to around in the New York tri-state area that they can make an appointment at the vision van with, if that's what they wanted to do. So. Yeah, we just felt that was a sort of a no-brainer, so to speak, in terms of providing that for the drivers.
To me, it's absolutely ingenious, and it's one of those we call Captain Obvious, like, hello, of course they need to be able to see where they're driving. And interestingly, like, you do have to do an eye test when you first get your driver's license, but after that you just keep renewing, and who knows what your eyes are up to by the time you get to the end. So that is absolutely essential, and I think, yes, of course, it's going to reduce damage costs with the, damaging the fleet of private cars and or actual cars and hitting other people, hitting pedestrian, hitting things. It is an absolute, true benefit. And of course, for the passengers, they're going to be grateful that their driver knows where to go and can see the road ahead of him in all kinds of conditions. So that's fantastic. Yes. Mm-hmm. So tell me yourself, Ira, have you ever, why did you personally join the Black Car Fund? Have you ever had anything to do with the driving industry yourself?
Yeah, it was, I was kind of blessed and lucky with the circumstances. My background was I was chief of staff at the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission for almost 10 years. And when the commissioner, my boss, who I believe you met, Matthew Doss, when he decided to leave during the Bloomberg administration here in New York, the mayor at the time, it's a political situation. So I loved the public service. I loved the job I was doing, but I knew that I was on the clock, so to speak. Every new commissioner likes to bring their own people in at the higher levels. So I was lucky enough that the gentleman who founded the Black Car Fund was retiring at the same time, and the Black Car Fund approached me if I was interested in applying for the position. And I must say I went through a rather rigorous screening process. But in the end, I got the job. So it was truly a blessing. It worked out great. A lot of these additional benefits and things have been under my tenure. The board's been willing when I took the job, they said, hey, we want you to take it to the next level. So I like to think that I try to do that every day. And I enjoyed the public service of working with the city at the time. So this being a not-for-profit and being able to do some good things for the drivers, is a nice little extension of that. And I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction from that, much more than when I worked in compliance on Wall Street. So.
Yeah, it's so very interesting where you come from and where you end up. And the last thing I wanted to say is that you must spend a lot of time, being in contact with all your different stakeholders. So tell me, you obviously get all these great ideas. You must be speaking with the cabbies. You must be speaking with the government. Tell me, how do you keep abreast of what they need and what they want? Tell me about that.
Well, we work closely, as I mentioned, with the Independent Drivers Guild. They have their finger on the pulse of the drivers. Of course, they represent them with Uber and Lyft. And also, I make sure I have open conversations with my staff and my managers. I have a tremendous amount of faith in them, and I keep an open door policy, so to speak. So when issues come up, I'm the type that likes to try to, when an issue comes up, I like to resolve it and get on top of it and come up with a solution. And I don't know if I'm oversimplifying it, but that's really what it comes down to. I spend a lot of my time dealing with politicians in my job as the executive director. I'm lucky enough that I have tremendous managers and a chief financial officer that I don't have to worry about that aspect of the business. And I have a chief claims officer and an actuary that I know they have total faith in them in how they're running that department. So it allows me to work on the more creative aspect, I guess you could say, of the position and the politics, which can be a little frustrating at times. I'm sure you would know, but for the most part, it works out well.
Fantastic. Now, as my last question to you today is, what do you think is the next things that you're looking, if you could have $1 million, and, when I say $1 million, I definitely don't mean Australian dollars, I mean US dollars, it's worth more. Tell me what would be a dream for you. Is there anything that you're kind of looking at that you want to add in that you haven't been able to get to yet? Like, what's the next thing you want to see the fund deliver? Is there something you're kind of wanting?
Yeah, I'll let you in on a little bit of a personal secret, I guess you could say. It'll take probably more than $1 million, but maybe not too much more. What I would like to see is that based on surveys that the Independent Drivers Guild did and conversations that I have with drivers, the thing that they're most fearful of is not being able to work. Okay, so they get concerned that if they get hurt and it's not on the job and they're not covered by workers' comp, what do I do then? And as independent contractors, there's an issue. So if you ask me for my number one wish list, I would like to be able to, when the law comes up for renewal, that somehow that we're able to potentially offer disability. So if the driver gets hurt off the job, that we could provide a safety net for that as well. We know we don't want to touch health care in general. That's something that's too big, and I think that it's covered in other areas. So what I like about what the Black Cause Fund is, what we've done is we've added to things to make that safety net bigger or to make it wider in terms of the drivers. They're usually able to get the health care benefits on their own, or they qualify for subsidies through the state or through the city or federal in this case. So I like that we're able to provide things that give them additional comfort.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, I think that's an amazing aspiration, and I do hope that, when it does renew, if there's an option to be part of it, I hope that...
Have me back in about a year. I'll let you know how negotiations are going.
I look forward to that. I also look forward to other states picking up and taking this model and plonking it in. Obviously, I think you have 84 states in the US. That's the number, isn't it? 84 different states and territories.
50.
Yeah, and then you have all the territories as well.
Right.
There's so many of you. That if only when your driver passed the border, he could have the next level of comfort in another state. So, I really, when we spoke at IAABC, that was, I think, the first thing on my lips. I was like, why is the rest of the states not doing this? And so, I think that's something that would also be, I think, amazing if other state, other governors in other states could pick it up.
Yeah, I agree with you. If when I spoke to you back in 2018 or even before that, if you told me in 2021 that New York State would still be the only state that has a black car fund type model, I would have been surprised. I would have thought there would have been quicker adoption of it. For my 2 cents worth, I think part of it is you have it's a political situation. I think you have one end of the political spectrum wants to just make them all employees, which I truly do not believe is the answer. And you have the people on the far end of the other spectrum that don't want to do anything more for them and say they're just independent contractors. So I think that it's been somewhat political that it hasn't happened more. But hopefully by the next time we chat, there'll be some other states. I've always gotten feelers, but no one's ever followed through on it.
Yeah, it's interesting actually because whichever way you chop it, whether they're an independent contractor or an employee, they need to be insured. And your solution solves the problem of however they define them. So I hope that one day soon that we get to talk about that. And I am so very grateful for your time today. And I am so very amazed at what you've been able to achieve with the Black Car Fund. And I look forward to the next iteration. And I thank you so very much for your time today.
Well, listen, I always love chatting with you. So anytime you think there's something you'd want to do with an audience, just let me know, Jillian. And if there's ever anything I could help you with behind the scenes as well, you can always reach out to me.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, thank you so very much. And it's a good evening. What time is it there at your place?
It is 6 o'clock exactly. The last thing I want to tell you is you got to come up with an excuse for me to make my way down to Australia, okay? You got to give me a It's on my bucket list.
Okay, well, I've got all the buckets here and I'm ready at any time to have you over for dinner. We're going to have a barbecue. My husband's now doing this American smoke business, so you're on. And okay. we are ready for visitors as soon as we can. And I'm so very pleased. I think you mentioned to me before that you've been lucky enough to get the vaccine already. Yes. We are all over the world. Everybody's looking to borders to be open for us to move again. And when they are, I do really hope to see you in Oz soon.
No, I can't commit to an exact time frame, but I think you'll see me sometime in the future.
I hope so too. Perfect. Now, thank you so much.